Sometimes cultures leave behind mysteries that baffle those who come after them. From standing stones to coded manuscripts, in today's Greatest Mysteries episode, we're going to talk about a few that have stood the test of time. We will talk about the Karnak stones, the Tarim mummies, the Indus Valley civilization, the Phaistos disc, the Minoans, the lost city of Tanis, the buried city of Petra, the bog bodies, the city of Teotihuacan, the Nazca Line, the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, the Great Serpent Mound, Easter Island, a lost Da Vinci, El Dorado, and a little more. So, if you are interested, stick around because this is a new episode from our series, Greatest Mysteries. This is your host, Danny, and this is English Plus Podcast. Now, before I start, let me remind you that you can find the transcript of this episode on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. The link is in the show notes. It will take you to the custom post I created for this episode. But while you're on the website, take some time to explore the many learning opportunities. And not only learning, you can enjoy many of the things you can find on the website. There are audio series, video series, the episodes with their transcripts and sometimes with exercises and more. You can opt in to receive the daily English Plus Bites and much more. And now, without further ado, let's start our very first question for today. And that question is, what is the meaning of the Karnak stones? That's coming next. Don't go away. More than 3,000 standing stones scoured by the wind and rain into hunched shapes form long avenues near the French village of Karnak. Made from both single stones, known as menhirs, and multi-stone groups known as dolmens. They stretch for 2 miles or 3 kilometers. Though the stones have stood for thousands of years, archaeologists have not traced their purpose or origins. The megaliths have been recognized as sacred by successive waves of Breton culture. Ancient Romans carved their gods on the granite surfaces. Christians later added their own symbols. According to one legend, the menhirs are the rocky remains of an army of pagans who chased Saint Cornely toward the sea. Cornered, he turned his pursuers into stone. In truth, the stones are far older than Christianity and most likely date to Brittany's pre-Celtic Neolithic period from about 4500 BC to 2000 BC. Were they raised in tribute to ancient gods? Did they honor ancestors? Do they track alignments of the sun or stars? So far, the Grey Armies have kept their secret. So that was our first mystery for today, the Karnak stones in France. But don't go away. Next, we're going to talk about the Tarim mummies. Who were the Tarim mummies? That's coming next. I'll be right back. Early in the 20th century, archaeologists reported an astonishing find. In northern China, on the edge of pitiless Taklamakan Desert, they were uncovering the preserved body of what to all appearances were Europeans. Buried in the Tarim River basin near a dry riverbed, these naturally mummified bodies had long blonde to brown hair and Western features. Some were close to 4,000 years old. At least one group, buried in what is known as the Small River Cemetery, wore woolen capes and felt caps with jaunty feathers, for all the world like alpine hikers. Curiously, they were interred in overturned boats, above which long oar-like poles were struck into the ground, possibly, researchers suggested, phallic symbols. DNA analysis of a group in the Small River Cemetery showed that the mummies' Western appearance was not deceptive. Their genes contained a mixture of European and Siberian lineages. Further evidence of an Eastern European heritage comes from the fact that later inhabitants of the area are known to have spoken an unusual Indo-European language known as Tocharian. Questions remain, however, about where the Tarim people came from, and the reason for their pilgrimage to the area is still unknown. So, another mystery to add to our Great Mystery series. I don't know if you've heard of the Taran mummies before, but it's time for you to dig in and learn a little more about it. And that's the point of all my series and everything I do in English Plus. I can't tell you about everything, obviously. There's no time in the world to do that. But I try to pique your curiosity so that you can go on and look up things on your own. I believe curiosity is the thing that truly sets us apart from all other species on this planet. Although some other species are curious, but we are curious with a purpose in mind. We want to learn more. And if you want to learn more, stick around because that's not the end of the episode. Next, we will talk about the Indus Valley. And our question is, what happened to the Indus Valley civilization? That's coming next. Don't go away. Three great civilizations dominated the ancient world: Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley culture. Mesopotamia and Egypt evolved over time, conquerors and conquered, merging with other cultures. Unlike Mesopotamia and Egypt, however, the Indus Valley civilization, the largest of the three, collapsed and vanished, and no one knows why. Flourishing between about 2500 BC and 1700 BC, the Indus Valley people occupied land in what is now mainly Pakistan on the Indian subcontinent. The civilization benefited from the highly fertile lands of the Indus River floodplains and trade from nearby Mesopotamia. Two large cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, testified to their sophistication and central planning. They were farmers, traders, and artisans whose supple figurines show a discerning eye. The culture was literate, with an elaborate script that remains largely undeciphered. Such a civilization seemed poised to spread through the fertile regions around it. Yet, around 1900 BC, the great city of Mohenjo-daro was wiped out by forces unknown, possibly Aryan invaders, described in the Rig Veda as destroying forts as age consumes a garment. Whoever and whatever tore through the city smashed its statues and moved on. By the end of the second millennium BC, the entire culture had vanished, and we still don't know exactly what happened to the Indus Valley civilization. Another great mystery to add to our list of great mysteries in our series, but that's not it. We still have more. Actually, there's still a lot more for today's episode, so don't go away. Next, I'm gonna talk about the Phaistos disc. And we're going to answer the question, what is written on the Phaistos disc? You might not have heard of the Phaistos disc. That's okay. We're going to talk about it next. Don't go away. I'll be right back. In 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier found a 6-inch or a 15-centimeter fired clay disc in the ruins of the ancient palace of Phaistos on the Greek island of Crete. Dating to perhaps 1700 BC, the time of the Minoan Bronze Age on the island. The disc bears a spiral of stamped symbols that have so far defied translation. The fact that symbols are stamped may suggest a capacity for mass production, although no other discovery supports that. The 242 signs, consisting of 45 unique stamps, are grouped into 61 segments. Many have recognizable shapes, such as a tattooed head, an arrow, a plane tree, a cat, and a beehive. And they may represent phonetic groups or syllables, but there are too few of them to be deciphered. No other artifact has ever been found with the same symbols. Attempts to unravel its mystery, Cretan, foreign, syllabic reading inward, alphabetic reading outward, are as varied as its interpreters. A few experts believe the disc is a hoax or forgery, but most accept it as genuine. Like other remnants of the enigmatic early Minoan culture, it continues to hold its secrets. Another mystery, right? Maybe you haven't heard of the Phaistos disc before, but now you have. And now you know it's still a mystery, and you might want to look it up. You can go do it, but not yet because we're not done. Next, I'm gonna talk about the Minoans, and I'm gonna ask the question, did a volcano destroy the Minoans? So that's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. When British archaeologist Arthur Evans uncovered the intricate ruins of an ancient palace on the island of Crete in 1900, he remembered the legend of King Minos. According to Greek mythology, the tyrannical Cretan ruler regularly fed young Athenians to the half-man, half-bull Minotaur he kept imprisoned at the center of a labyrinth. Although Minos, his creature, and his labyrinth may never have existed, Evans's discoveries showed that a great pre-Hellenic culture had indeed once thrived on the Aegean island, and he named it the Minoan civilization. The Minoans flourished from roughly 2700 BC to 1450 BC. Literate and artistic, they commanded trading networks throughout Europe and the Near East. Their civilization came to an abrupt end, however. The great palaces of Knossos and elsewhere were destroyed, and Cretan culture vanished. The reasons are still hotly debated. Around this time, a volcano on the nearby island of Thera erupted. Did an earthquake, volcanic ash, a tsunami, or some combination of these bring down the Minoan palaces? Or did Mycenaean armies invade? A theory supported by the appearance of Mycenaean artifacts after this period. Could the Minoans have been pulled down from within by an insurrection? Or was it a combination of several factors, natural disasters that weakened the culture and armies that gave it the death blow? Despite a wealth of material, for now, the Minoans are still keeping their secrets. And that's another mystery for our episode today. But again, don't worry, we still have more mysteries for today, so don't go anywhere. Because next, I'm gonna ask the question of the hidden treasure in the Egyptian city of Tanis. Are there hidden treasures in the Egyptian city of Tanis? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. Tanis may be the most spectacular archaeological site you've never heard of. Fans of Raiders of the Lost Ark might recognize it as the buried city that supposedly held the Ark of the Covenant. Readers of the Old Testament may know it as Zoan, where Moses was said to work miracles. Today it is known as San el-Hagar, but the real historical city of Tanis, capital of 21st dynasty Egypt, was lost to the world for roughly 2,000 years. Once located on the Nile Delta, it vanished beneath the sands when the river shifted its course. No one knew where to find it or just what lay within. European investigators began to uncover portions of the city by the 19th century. But the most spectacular finds came in 1939, when French archaeologist Pierre Montet uncovered a royal tomb complex holding golden masks, jewelry, silver coffins, and other treasures rivaling those of King Tut. Sadly for Montet, World War II intervened and eclipsed his discoveries. Though some of Tanis's treasures can now be found in Cairo's Egyptian Museum, scientists know there is more to be found. Infrared satellite imagery reveals more buildings wanting to be uncovered. So, are there still hidden treasures in this Egyptian city of Tanis? We still don't know, but it is definitely a mystery that deserves a place in our Greatest Mysteries series. And next, we're going to talk about another city that is not in any way less spectacular. We're talking about the buried city of Petra. What will be found in the buried city of Petra? That's what we're going to talk about next. Don't go anywhere. Travelers seeking the eastern entrance of Petra, the ancient city in Jordan's southwestern corner, one of the most dramatic approaches in the world. A 250-foot high, or 76 meters, slot canyon known as the Seek. At the canyon's end are the immense pillars of the treasury, which is actually a temple carved into the sandstone cliff. Inside, a small tomb. Once an immensely wealthy city, Petra is now largely hidden under sand and debris. Petra was founded by the Nabateans, who were Arab nomads who settled in the area and made it into a center of trade for perhaps 1,000 years, from about 300 BC to about 700 AD. Clever water systems allowed for public baths and lush gardens in the desert. Romans moved in around the 2nd century AD after which the city began to decline, until most of its villas, theaters, and temples had vanished and its original inhabitants were forgotten. Today, it is a major tourist attraction and a UNESCO heritage site, but most of its wonders remain buried under the desert sand. A mystery, is it not? But definitely one of the most beautiful places you will ever see, especially if you're interested in historic places. So that was another mystery in our series, and next we're going to talk about the bog bodies. And our question will be, were the bog bodies victims of human sacrifice? Well, you might have never heard of the bog bodies, but you will, because that's what we're going to do next, so don't go anywhere. They are some of the world's best preserved murder victims. Bog bodies have been unearthed in peaty wetlands across northern Europe, in Denmark, the British Isles, Germany, and the Netherlands. Some have been reduced to skeletons, but many are in a remarkable state of natural mummification, with skin intact down to the last worry line. Pickled by the acidic, oxygenless conditions of certain bogs, the bodies represent a wide range of eras, from 8000 BC to the 20th century, but most date to the Iron Age, roughly 2500 years ago. These are not unlucky hikers who happened to stumble into a boggy trap. Most had been bludgeoned, stabbed, or hanged, like the Danish Toland man, buried with a leather noose still tight around his neck. Lacking written records, archaeologists have been reduced to speculation about the intent behind these murders. Perhaps the victims were particularly despised criminals. Many researchers, however, now believe that the ritual killings were human sacrifices to gods or goddesses. Bodies found in Ireland, for example, often bear marks of status, such as jewelry, and are dismembered and interred along boundary lines between kingdoms. Unfortunate hostages or royal prisoners, they may have been sacrificed and placed in the bogs as a form of magical protection, remaining intact long after their executioners had disappeared. So, that is another mystery, and now you've heard of the bog bodies if you haven't heard of them before. But were they the victims of human sacrifice? Who knows? That is why it's one of our great mysteries. But that's not the end of today's mysteries. Next, we're going to talk about the city of Teotihuacan. Who built Teotihuacan? I'm sure you've heard of the city. The name definitely rings a bell, but actually we're going to discuss this mystery. Who built the city? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. The unknown builders of the great city of Teotihuacan seemed determined to leave no clues to their identity. Begun around 100 BC on the Mexican plateau, the city rapidly became the largest metropolis in the Western Hemisphere, covering 8 square miles, or about 20 square kilometers, and housing between 80,000 and 100,000 inhabitants. Streets were laid out on a grid, bisected by the broad Avenue of the Dead. The tremendous Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon towered over wide roads, temples, residential compounds, and workshops. For all of this, the industrious folk who raised the city left behind no record of their language or origins. Even the city's mellifluous name was bestowed by a later culture, the Aztecs. As it prospered, Teotihuacan seemed to have drawn immigrants from other cultures, including the Maya and Mixtec. Daily life may have involved routine brutality. Skeletons in the temples appeared to be ritual sacrifices. Even combs, buttons, and needles were made from freshly harvested human bone. As mysteriously as it arose, the city was destroyed, burned, and abandoned in the 7th century AD. Invaders may have been responsible, but some researchers note that most of the burned buildings belonged to the upper classes. Teotihuacan may have fallen from within, pillaged by an oppressed populace in a time of drought. Maybe. But definitely that is a mystery that's earned its place in our greatest mystery series. But don't go anywhere, because next we're gonna ask the question, could Palenque solve Maya mysteries? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. Researchers are still filling in the blanks about the rise and fall of the great Maya civilization. Despite the wealth of written records the Maya left behind, some of these records have been found at the Mexican site of Palenque, a stately city of stone temples and plazas that flourished from about 200 to 900 AD. Abandoned to the jungle for hundreds of years, Palenque's structures, particularly the stair-step temple of inscriptions, contain extensive carved glyphic texts. By the time the first Europeans reached the Yucatan Peninsula in the 16th century, however, no one remained who could read them. Ham-fisted investigations did not help matters. In the 1780s, Colonel Antonio del Rio began his search of Palenque's palace by smashing through its walls. More recently, though, scholars have begun to unravel the complex glyphs after entering the tomb of Maya ruler Pakal found within the Temple of Inscriptions. In the 1970s, archaeologists at Palenque managed to decode a list of kings. Today, about 90% of the glyphs have been deciphered, revealing a complex logographic script in which symbols could represent either syllables or words. Inscriptions are revealing a warlike people whose internal conflicts may have helped bring about their own destruction. But we still have some mysteries, and that's why I included it as one of our great mysteries. And now we'll move on to talk about the Nazca lines. What's the purpose of the Nazca lines? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. 2,000 years ago, people etched more than 1,000 outside figures in the coastal desert of southwestern Peru. Quadrangles, trapezoids, spirals, narrow lines, and outlines suggesting the shapes of giant creatures stretch across hundreds of square miles of arid plateaus concentrated between the towns of Nazca and Palpa. In the 1920s, Trans-Andean pilots rediscovered the enormous geoglyphs, prompting decades of research to answer the question, what are they for? Many answers have been suggested and discarded over the years. We know that the markings were created primarily by the Nazca culture, which flourished from about 200 BC to 600 AD. Students of the figures have theorized that they represent irrigation lines, an astronomical calendar, Inca roads, icons to be viewed from archaic hot air balloons, and, in the most persistent and improbable notion, spaceports for alien aircraft. Today's leading explanation is simpler. The glyphs may have formed ceremonial pathways in a holy landscape. Many of the figures are associated with rain or fertility, and traces of footprints can still be seen along the lines. So, is that the answer? Well, we don't know for sure. It's still a mystery, and that's the beautiful thing about mysteries. We can't have a definitive answer to why they were there. What's the purpose of the Nazca lines? And all the questions we've asked so far in the episode. But that's not the end of it. That's not the end of the episode. We're going to ask more questions. So don't go anywhere, because next I'm going to ask the question, is the Bighorn medicine wheel an astronomical calendar? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. Whatever its purpose, the Bighorn medicine wheel was not meant to be easy to reach. The 75-foot wide or 23-meter stone circle is located at the top of Medicine Mountain, 9,642 feet or 2,939 meters up in Wyoming's Bighorn Mountain Range. For about 10 months of the year, it is buried under impassable snow. In spite of this, or perhaps because of it, the wheel is a sacred Native American site. Probably constructed by Plains Indian tribes about 700 years ago, it is the best known of some 70 similar wheels found in the United States and Canada. At the Bighorn wheel's center is a stone cairn, from which radiate 28 rocky spokes. 6 more cairns are positioned around the circumference. No records exist to tell us of its original purpose, but the wheel's alignment is suggestive. The line from one cairn through the hub marks sunrise at the summer solstice. The line from another cairn marks sunset on the same day. Another alignment tracked the rising of the bright stars Sirius, Aldebaran, and Rigel, which are important in the legends of several Indian peoples. The 28 spokes may represent the 28 days in the lunar calendar. Intentionally or not, the wheel makes an impressive astronomical calendar. But of course, as usual, we don't know that for sure. It's still a mystery. And that's not everything. Next, we're going to talk about the first American colonists. Were America's first colonists Vikings? That's what we're going to talk about next. Don't go anywhere. For generations, American school children were taught in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, marking the discovery of North America. Even though thoughtful teachers pointed out that the New World had been discovered thousands of years earlier by Native Americans, the Italian navigator was hailed as the first European to reach the continent. Dissenters, however, have pointed to an alternate theory. According to medieval Norse sagas, the enterprising Viking Leif Erikson set sail from Greenland in the year 1000 and reached a lush, grassy land to the west, rich with timber, salmon, and grapes. Other Norse families soon joined him in Vinland, where they began to clash with the natives they called Skraelings. This account was met with skepticism until 1960, when two Norwegian explorers, Helge and Anne Ingstad, began to uncover the remains of a colony at Lanso Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. Buried within the confines of 8 buildings were Norse artifacts, including a lamp, a cloak pin, a spindle, and iron boat nails. Scholars now generally agree that Lanso Meadows was the first Norse colony in North America, probably inhabited for just a few years before the families returned to Greenland, with their discovery fading into Norse legend. So, that was about the first American colonists. But again, we still don't know for sure. We just have findings and theories. But I kind of tend to believe this theory. I don't know about you. It's up to you. If you want to learn more, why don't you just go look up some more information and maybe share them with me if you like? I'm always willing to learn something new. And I bet you are too, because that's not the end of our episode. Next, we're going to talk about the Great Serpent Mound. What is the meaning of the Great Serpent Mound? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. More than 1,300 feet, or 396 meters long, about 20 to 25 feet, or 6 to 8 meters wide, and 4 to 5 feet, or 1 to 2 meters high, the Great Serpent Mound undulates across the hills of southern Ohio, the largest effigy mound in the world. Its tail ends in an elegant coil, and its head seems to be swallowing a giant egg. Who built it and what it means are still unknown. First described in the 1840s, the sinuous mound was originally attributed to the ancient Adena people, who inhabited the area from about 500 BC to 200 AD, and whose remains are found in nearby burials. More recently, radiocarbon dating suggests that it is younger, perhaps about 900 years old, from the time of the Fourth Ancient People. The Fourth Ancient culture was influenced by the Mississippian culture, which featured rattlesnakes in much of its iconography. Indeed, many Native American cultures imbued serpents with spiritual power. Some archaeologists point out that the serpent mound's head aligns with the summer solstice, so it may have had an astronomical or ceremonial purpose. In the absence of any artifacts or written records, however, the mound may remain a vast, serpentine enigma. And another great mystery for our series. And not the last for today's episode. Next, we're going to talk about Easter Island, and we're going to ask the question whether we will ever understand Easter Island's art and writings. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui in the language of its people, is the most isolated inhabited spot on Earth. More than 1,000 years ago, its inhabitants raised hundreds of multi-ton monoliths known as moai that have fascinated archaeologists since their discovery some 300 years ago. Carved primarily from volcanic tuff with hand tools, the statues were transported somehow to positions on stone platforms. What was their purpose? How did the people lacking technology move the monoliths? Easter Islanders said the statues walked. Some writers claimed the moai could only have been positioned by lost civilizations or extraterrestrials. More scholarly sources suggested they could have been hauled on frames. Recently, archaeologists have shown that the Eastern Islanders might have had it right. The statues walked. A couple of dozen people using ropes can rock a moai from side to side on its curved base and walk it forward. By the time European explorers arrived, many of the moai were toppled and their meaning lost to memory. They may have been symbols of power between warring groups. They may have had a peaceful religious purpose. Who knows? Wooden and stone tablets found here are also a mystery. They contain an undeciphered Rongo-Rongo script. The curious glyphs run left to right, then left to right when the tablet is upended. Like the statues, the script has so far defied explanation. Another mystery. Next, we're going to talk about the Voynich manuscript. What is the meaning of this manuscript? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. The Voynich manuscript is both a code breaker's delight and bane. The 240-page vellum work is written in an unknown language and contains hundreds of inked illustrations of astrological symbols, unidentified planets, and bizarre human figures. Legions of cryptographers, including some of the best in the world, have tried and failed to decipher the manuscript's lettering. Is it an herbal manual? An alchemical guide? No one knows. The manuscript is named after the Polish-American bookseller Wilfrid Voynich, who bought it in 1912, but its provenance is much older. The work dates back at least to the Emperor Rudolf II of Germany, who lived from 1576 to 1612. And Emperor Rudolf acquired it for 600 gold ducats, believing it to be the work of medieval scholar Roger Bacon. The seller may have been the notorious English astrologer and student of the occult John Dee, who had a collection of Bacon's works. The manuscript then passed through various other European owners, none of whom could make sense of it. If the indecipherable manuscript is a hoax, it is an old one. Recent tests show that it dates to the early 15th century. Today, the Voynich manuscript resides in Yale's library as mysterious as ever. So, it is still a big mystery. Who knows? If it is a hoax, it's one of the oldest hoax there is. But it is another mystery in our episode, and it's not the last one. We still have a couple of mysteries before we end today's episode. The next one, we're going to talk about whether a Florentine wall hid a lost Da Vinci. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. In 1502, Florentine politician Piero Soderini commissioned Leonardo da Vinci to paint a mural in Florence's Palazzo Vecchio. The final painting, depicting the victory of Tuscan forces at the Battle of Anghiari, was huge, as much as 20 feet or 6 meters long and 10 feet or 3 meters high. Da Vinci was not happy with it, however. Experimenting with oil paints on the wall of the Hall of the 500, the artists found that the colors ran and blurred. He abandoned the mural unfinished. Many viewers were impressed by the dramatic battle scene, but when the hall was remodeled, artist Giorgio Vasari was hired to paint over Da Vinci's work. Some scholars think that Vasari, an admirer of Da Vinci's work, built a false wall to protect it and painted his own mural on top. Is the Da Vinci still here, hidden and immensely valuable? In 2012, art historian Maurizio Serracini announced that he had inserted a tiny camera into a crack in the wall and detected a hollow space and black pigment behind Vasari's mural. The investigation is on hold, leaving the fate of the lost masterpiece an open question. So, does a Florentine wall hide a lost Da Vinci? Who knows? It's not easy to answer. Even with all the technology we have, it's not an easy question to answer. It's still a mystery. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. Who knows? But next, we're going to talk about the Piri Reis map. what are the sources of the Piri Reis map? That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. Haji Ahmad Muhyiddin Piri, better known now as Piri Reis or Captain Piri, was an accomplished Turkish admiral and map maker of the 16th century. Cartographers and lost civilization enthusiasts know him primarily as the creator of a beautiful 1513 map. Lost for many years, the map was rediscovered in the 20th century and is now held in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. It seems to represent just part of the original document, given some references to Asia found in the writing. But unfortunately, the rest of the map has vanished. It may be the oldest surviving map to show the Americas. For cartographers, the map is remarkable for its detailed rendering of the coast of South America only 2 decades after European discovery. For those with a more imaginative bent, the document is said to show land masses including Antarctica, unknown at the time, and therefore the map must have been created thousands of years earlier by an unknown advanced civilization. The claim derives mainly from the fact that the map's South American coastline veers far to the east, almost as if tracing the northern edge of Antarctica. However, closer examination shows that the coast is quite different from that of Antarctica, and the latitude is thousands of miles astray. Piri Reis notes on the map that he compiled it from many sources, including Portuguese explorers, and it seems likely that those sources were simply too sparse to be accurate. However, the document does contain information that in theory was unknown at the time, including the presence of an interior mountain range in South America. The true mystery may be who charted these details and why has history forgotten these early explorers? That remains a mystery, but that's not the last mystery for today's episode. We still have 2 more. Don't go anywhere because we're going to talk about El Dorado next. I'll be right back. The first El Dorado was a man, not a city. Spanish explorers in South America heard his legend early in the 1500s. Somewhere in the Andes, they were told, the Muisca Indians would initiate a new chief by dusting him with gold from head to foot and tossing gold and emeralds into a sacred lake. Besotted with greed, Spanish, German, Portuguese, and English adventurers ventured into the unforgiving wilds of Colombia, Guyana, Brazil, and anywhere else that sounded promising in search of this mystic treasure. Over time, El Dorado was transformed in the telling from a man into a valley paved with gold, just waiting for discovery. Among the adventurers were Sir Walter Raleigh, whose son Wat died in the attempt in 1617, and who was himself executed upon his return to Europe for disobeying the king's instructions. Many people, both Native Americans and Europeans, died in these brutal quests. No golden trove was ever found. There may be some truth to the legend, however. The lake mentioned in the Muisca story may be Laguna Guatavita high in the Andes near Bogota, Colombia. Some golden objects and jewels have been dredged from that body of water and another nearby. But attempts to drain the lake and recover the reputed riches have all failed. Whatever treasure is drowned there remains undisturbed. And now we come to the very last mystery for today's episode. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. It's as if archaeologists of the future discovered the last few pages of a notepad of today with the faint impressions of doodles, grocery lists, musings, and schoolwork overlaid on the paper. In 2009, excavations in an old well in Jamestown, Virginia, America's first permanent European settlement, uncovered a colonial-era slate tablet covered with overlapping, scratched inscriptions. These include drawings of a man with a ruffed collar, what appears to be a palmetto tree, and words reading either a minion of the finest sort, a minion, or minion, being either a servant or canon, or the more modest, I am none of the finest sort. The slate's marks and original owner or owners remain a mystery. The palmetto tree suggests that the artist had been traveling south of Jamestown. He may have been William Strachey, who survived a shipwreck in Bermuda to become the colony's first secretary. The well in which the tablet was found was dug around 1608 to 1610 under the orders of John Smith, Jamestown's leader, and was made into a trash pit after it became brackish and unusable. Colonial trash is an archaeologist's treasure, and the discarded slate is a particularly valuable find. But we still don't understand a lot about it, and maybe it was not that important, who knows? But it is still an archaeological find. And with this question and this find and this mystery, we come to the end of today's Great Mysteries episode. Don't forget that our Great Mysteries series is not over yet. We still have a couple of episodes to come. And for those of you who are listening to Great Mysteries for the very first time, this is definitely not episode 1. This is episode 3. So you can go back and listen to episode 1 and 2 because these are as interesting as this episode, if not even more. And more is coming your way. Don't forget that you can find the transcript of this episode on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. The link is in the show notes. And don't forget to explore the website while you're there because there are a lot of interesting things you can find on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. That's everything for today. This is your host, Danny. Thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. I will see you next time.